Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of 8 Dead Giants. And sadly, this giant is all by himself today. So that means you're going to get an intimate experience, a one-on-one conversation with me. I've got lots to talk about, and frankly, we were off last week, and we're going to be off again next week as well. Last week was off for an amazing combined Sten and Hen do that I had with a big group of friends, who I know some of which listen to this. So shout out, especially to the bride and groom, James and Milena. And next week, I'm off for their wedding for James and Milena. So, and I'm honoured to be the best man, but I didn't want to leave you guys without an episode this week. And frankly, I've got lots to chat about. We've got lots to talk about, lots to go over, some really cool games and movies and TV to talk about. And this is going to be, obviously, because it's all just me, the ultimate ramble chat. I've got a few things written down that I want to cover, but it's really going to be a case of let's just see how long this goes. It could be short, it could be long, I really don't know. And honestly, I don't think I'm even going to bother with any breaks or interstitials, because we're just gonna freeform this, guys. We're just gonna wax lyrical. And James and Milena can get an idea if they listen to this what my best man speech might be like. So just expect shambolic rambling, lots of 4-letter words, lots of multiple syllables to make me sound smart as well. You know, mix that up. So lots of ums and lots of curvaceous indications of intelligence and verisimilitude. There you go. What am I talking about? I don't even know. You guys won't know. Shall we get on to some games, right? Because you'll see from the title of this episode that obviously the focus today, the big headline, is Borderlands 4. And I hoped to have a giant on with me to play some Borderlands 4, but unfortunately he hasn't had enough time to play much Borderlands 4 and didn't feel equipped. I've put in maybe 10, 12 hours. I'm around the level 20 mark. I haven't had a great amount of time either. I've actually got some time coming up this week where I will be able to spend some more time with it. But I think that's more than enough time to get an impression of the game and get an impression of where the fourth installment in this franchise, you know, in the core franchise, I should say, my word, doing well so far, aren't we? Has taken the gameplay mechanics. And let's be real, Borderlands 4, it's a lot like Borderlands 3, which is a lot like Borderlands 2, which is a lot like Borderlands 1. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. These are a product of a 360 generation. They're a looter-shooter with a pretty thinly constructed narrative around vault hunters on a mysterious planet, looking for riches, looking to deal with usually a big bad, and in this case it's the Timekeeper. I'm still kind of early days, so I'm still sort of finding out that character's motivations. I'm playing as Vex, who is a Siren class. I'm playing as a sort of damage dealing high DPS build, which is my predominant kind of construct at the moment, though I'm sure I'll play with the builds as we go forwards. And yeah, it's Borderlands, right? So you find interesting guns, hopefully. You get to sort of mix and match that with your skills and your powers, and it's all about maximizing your damage and killing as the enemies and destroying bosses and picking up more loot, rinse, repeat. That's the cycle, with often a sort of comedically written script, though honestly I play this game as almost a podcast game. Like I have the sound down low. I'm not paying that much attention to dialogue or story. I'm kind of just enjoying the gameplay and often watching a movie or listening to a podcast as I play in my office. So it as one of those games, which is also, you could argue, a Diablo 4 or any kind of like action RPG loot based game, it needs to have a good sort of gameplay loop at its core, and I think it's fair to say Borderlands has this. I think it's also fair to say this is a lot better than the third game, where the writing and actually the characterization was so over the top edgelord that it was quite annoying and distracting from that fun loop, and they've toned that down and they've brought that back. So the actual gameplay itself is pretty good. I mean, this game isn't a game that's going to set the world on fire for its creativity or its originality. It's certainly not doing anything that new from the previous games in the franchise, but it has been 6 years since we had a main Borderlands game. We did have a Tiny Tina sort of fantasy type game in the middle there, which I actually really enjoyed, but it's been a good while since Borderlands 3. So I'm more than happy to engage with that again. I was on the fence about getting this, and the reviews came in and they were really positive, and I'm like, or at least more positive than I expected. So I was drawn back in and happy to give it a go, and I have enjoyed my time with it. Big caveat here. this game has technical issues right now on console and on PC for different reasons. Basically, the performance mode on console has seemingly some kind of memory leak issue around the engine, Unreal Engine 5, which means the longer you actually play it in a continuous setting, the worse the frame rate gets and the performance drops more and more over time, which is a big issue and it desperately needs to be patched. And this is a game that's running at best 1080p on the most powerful console hardware right now. So it's quite poorly optimized and surprising how poor it is in a technical sense. And then on PC, the issues seem to be myriad. They seem to be all kinds of optimization issues around even like really high quality graphics cards and modern cards. I'm confident that Gearbox and 2K are going to get those patches out and they will resolve these issues in the coming weeks, because they can't ignore them. However, it is a real detractor for that kind of, I'm going to have a big sesh, I'm going to put 6 hours in. You know, the only fix for that memory leak issue is to save, fully quit the game, launch it again, and then it'll play all right. But, you know, it starts to see those dips after as short a time as half an hour. So it's really noticeable. Weirdly, if you play on the quality setting, which is higher resolutions and like better light maps and things like that, though not particularly improved resolutions, if you play on the quality setting, it locks it much closer to a 30 FPS setting. So you don't see as much of that degradation. You don't really see any of that degradation in the frame rate as you do on the performance mode, which I think is really curious. But I also don't want to play a game like this at 30 frames. It's a game that is really going to benefit from that smoother feeling of 60 frames, especially if you're playing it on a monitor or a TV that supports variable refresh rates, which they can really take advantage of that. So yeah, I think there's going to be performance patching. They might bring in other presets and stuff to try and mitigate some of these issues as well. But that's all to come. So right now, that is an issue with the game, which might make me say it's worth holding off on that initial purchase until these issues are sorted, which is a real shame. I haven't had a chance to play it in co-op yet. I'm really eager to do that, and to team up with some of my fellow Vault Hunters and the fellow Giants who are also playing it. But I'm having a fun time. It's just there's not a lot to talk about in terms of review of this because it feels very much like more of the same and a bit of a throwback in that regard. So you have to ask yourself, am I in the mood for a 360 era looter shooter? More of that same kind of humor, more of that same writing and style. And they've done some nice changes. That they've improved mobility. They've got this grapple hook mechanic now. They've got a spawnable, instantly sort of rideable sort of jet bike, very Destiny reminiscent, and they've also made the world much more contiguous open world structure, so there's a lot less loading between areas. So that feels like the right steps to have taken, but they also do feel a bit like half steps. At the end of the day, the actual gameplay loop still feels very, very reminiscent. And like I said, I've got about 15-20 hours into it at this point, and I wonder if I will stick with it. I'm hoping to spend time with it this week, but after that, am I gonna push for 50? Am I going to engage with the game? I'm not 100% sure yet. I think that performance issue needs to really be addressed for me to commit that sort of gameplay time. However, with those kind of, you know, drop off of my go-to stalwart games such as Destiny 2, where that has like never been less interesting to me, this could be a game I just dip in and out of when I put a podcast on or put a movie on, or maybe just to hang out with some friends. So I would give this right now a 3 out of 5, just because it's good. I don't want to say solid because it's not, because of the technical issues, but it is more of that fun loop that you remember before the annoyingness of Borderlands 3. So if you're in the mood for like that reminiscent nostalgia of Borderlands 2, yeah, pick up Borderlands 4, hopefully when the technical issues are resolved in the next week or two. Just keep an eye on the internet for those sort of updates. The other game I really want to talk about is something entirely different, and to me, very creative, very fresh. I'd never seen a game quite like this before, and I was really kind of hooked into it. And it's a game called Heading Out, that's only just come to consoles, which is why it kind of came onto my radar, though it has been out on PC, I think, for quite some time. Now, this is a driving game. Now, when you think driving game, you generally think racing game, and that's, you know, what happens in this game, because your way of gameplay into this experience is through driving a vehicle. However, it's actually a narratively driven story game. So the concept is that it's a run-based 70s driving film inspired narrative experience in which you get to choose and make choices throughout, shaping your character, shaping how the world perceives them. And then each run can be different and brings its own challenges as you unlock other effects and different cars that are going to kind of have an effect on your experience. Now, I've only done one complete run at this point, and that took me, I don't know, like an hour or two to do all of the stuff and to like get the unlocks. But I'm really excited to play more of this game. It's got this black and white style with like sort of single color highlighting, often in red or blue, to pull out elements. It's got a really cool look to it. And it's made by a Polish developer called Serious Sim that try to make games that say something, that are kind of addressing issues or trying to be narratively interesting. So they have quite a lofty goal. But this 70s set driving film, which is a genre that I am quite fond of, that are very much a time capsule of that era of filmmaking. Films that come to mind are Convoy, which definitely stands out as this strange Sam Peckinpah it's a very strange movie. If you've never seen Convoy, everybody knows the song, but most people haven't seen the film. So it's kind of like worth checking out just for its slightly odd take on this rebellious Americana vibe. Sort of a similar time and also inspired by probably, but connected to in the same genre of an Easy Rider. It also comes to mind. And then other things like Vanishing Point, again, a really cool 70s car movie. But even if you get into the more modern setting, which sort of is sent up this genre, which is Blues Brothers, and then there's Starsky and Hutch. And the idea of, in the 70s, America was still this big space that was mostly unfilled and that wasn't like as connected as it is now. So the idea of road movies, of traveling across that huge continent, discovering new people, often running from the law, drifting from town to town, that vibe of post-Vietnam, that vibe of sort of like economic challenge, of ennui, of untrust in government and policing. And this game brings a lot of that into it, heading out, and it's really intriguing and interesting, and it's got a great style, and the driving is good, as are the choices and the kind of writing around the characters you face, as is the voice acting, as is the performances, and it's especially impressive, I think, how well it's done in English, because obviously this was developed by a Polish team with that Eastern European vibe, but at the same time this feels very Americana, very true to the genre that they are aping and that has inspired it. And it's a little game that I don't think I'd heard of until it hit console. I happened to see this thing. I can't remember what drew my attention to it. I think it might have been just a little press release or maybe on the subreddit of Xbox subreddit or something like that. And I was like, heading out, never heard of this. And then I dug into it and I immediately went, oh yeah, I'm buying that. That sounds like it's going to be my jam. And it is. It's really clever, really cool. I don't think nearly enough people know about it. So check out Heading Out, because I love playing games that do something different, that try something different, that are ambitious, that obviously there's a lot of skill in the development here. I wouldn't say it's full of jank. It doesn't push beyond its limits, which is what you sometimes see with these ambitious indie games. It's really cool. Give it a look. I bet you can get it on a Steam sale or on an Epic Game sale or wherever, whatever storefront you find it on. I'm sure it's going to be reasonably priced. I can't remember how much I spent for it. It wasn't a lot, but I did get it at release. And it's just different and cool, and I love that. Super creative. I'm going to give that one, that's 4 stars. That's better than Borderlands. That's so much better than Borderlands. It's so much different and so creative, and I've never done anything quite like it. And I love to see it when developers try to put story and narrative and character into driving games. It's really hard to do. And you often, don't see it very often in the big flagship racing games, of which now there are less and less and less. But there is actually a really good story mode in the F1 franchise of games at the moment called Breaking Point, which is actually a really good narrative kind of container for driving in that game. But this is the whole thing. It's not just a separate mode. This whole thing is Scream 70s, gives you this awesome vibe. The Interstate Jackalope, I believe, is your moniker in this, and it's awesome. It's just super cool. Check it out. Like, honestly, go on their website, have a little look. They didn't send me a code or anything. I just discovered this, and I'm like, I wish I'd reached out to him and got a code so I could promote it. But I just didn't know it existed. So yeah, Serious Sim, Heading Out. Look up their website, headingout.games. Give you an idea, then watch the trailer, have a little look at what it looks like. It's so unique. Super cool. 4 out of 5 stars. So that's it for games. So I think I'm going to move us into movies. And the first thing I want to touch on real quick is that when I had Matt on last, one of my fellow giants, we did, in the last episode that went out, we did a big deep dive into comedy movies, and he'd seen Naked Gun. I hadn't seen it at that point. I have now seen The Naked Gun, the new movie with Liam Neeson. I won't go into it all again because we talked about it quite a lot in the last episode, but it is just as good as Matt said. I loved it. It's in an absolute homage to the originals, but still its own thing, and Liam Neeson does a great job. I think the third act is, as is often the case in third acts of these types of movies, isn't as strong as the first two acts, but Pamela Anderson's very good, and the villain of the piece is very good. I can't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but it is very funny. It's not quite laugh a minute as rapid laughs as the originals, I don't think, and it doesn't stand up to an Airplane, for example, for that sort of machine gun shotgun approach of comedy, but the jokes do for the most part really land. Some of them are very, very funny, very, very creative, and what you'd want from this type of movie. Like I said, I am a massive fan of the kind of cop comedy subgenre, and this will sit perfectly in that. I really hope they get to do more in this series. I think they will. I think it's been a big success, so check it out, guys. If you're in the mood for a laugh, The Naked Gun is just constant giggles. Loved it. And then I've kind of been on, it's like themed movie fest. It's the only way to describe it. So the first group of films I've watched, the theme was Tom Hanks movies. Don't know why, but I love Tom Hanks. He's a brilliant actor, and I've decided to rewatch. I've rewatched 3 in the last week of some of his films, and I absolutely love them. I think on the list, I've still got 2 to go. I want to do Captain Phillips, and I want to do Sully, both of which you'll be shocked to hear I have not seen, which is pretty crazy that I've not got round to watching those yet. But I did rewatch 3 movies that I have seen before, which was Castaway, Forrest Gump, and Big, which are all bona fide classics in my mind. I love Big. That's early Tom Hanks. It's such a cool concept. Love that obviously when I was a little kid, when I first saw that, the idea of wishing to be an adult, and then the comedy that ensues from that. But it's actually quite a sad movie. I think you forget how sad that movie is. It's about him, realizing he wants to go home and be a kid again, even though he's sort of fallen in love as an adult. It's got some, I think, if you wouldn't make that movie quite the same now. The idea of a child in an adult's body then being kind of in an adult relationship with a woman in like New York City is sort of a little bit problematic, shall we say? But I think at the time it was an incredible sort of fantasy, the idea that you could be an adult for a week and, find out what it was to live like that. And the funny is there's a toy executive and he gets to like live this dream job. And yeah, that's fantastically good fun. Obviously, I think who hasn't seen Forrest Gump at this point? It's a classic movie. Life is like a box of chocolates, and all the vignettes that you get through that. It's a fantastic tapestry of storytelling that goes that sort of is strung out across Americana, that at the point it was made, that era all the way from Vietnam up to I think it's like the early 90s in the movie, or the late 80s, and that stretch of history that happened there. There was so much that happened, and obviously telling the story through the eyes of Forrest Gump, who is obviously a little bit challenged in mental capacity, but he's got the heart of gold, and he's got this beautiful outlook on life, and he obviously goes through quite a lot of suffering and sadness, and it's a very emotional film, but it has a great streak of kind of humanistic comedy throughout it. And if you've not seen Forrest Gump, or you've not seen it in a long time, no excuse, just check it out. It's a brilliant movie. And the final one, Castaway, wow, it just shows you Tom Hanks is, that was the kind of movie that made you go, do you know what, this guy, there's no one else basically in that film after the first act, and his solo performance and the journey he goes on as this, modern retelling of Robinson Crusoe, and it's just stranded on that island, how he survives and how he gives this just emotional performance as he kind of comes to terms with his predicament, survives. Then obviously there's a time jump that happens, and it's 4 years later, and basically that really hits home that, wow, he's been there a long time. He finally gets off, and then obviously when he gets back to the world, the life has changed entirely, and the woman he was going to marry has moved on. They really thought he was dead, and it's just tragic and sad. But at the same time, this is like that's what Tom Hanks movies do so well, that they give you this incredible humanistic performances. They're often complex emotionally. They give you this gamut of emotions from like happiness, sadness, hope, despair. You know, he hits it all. He's one of the greatest sort of humanistic performers working in Hollywood, and he just brings such relatable humanity to everything he does that he's infinitely watchable. It's always worth checking out a new Tom Hanks movie. Some say they're schmaltzy, but I think, you know, if you want to see emotionality in a performance with depth, he's one of the best. Then on the, I couldn't get onto the furthest, different end of the spectrum here. The other kind of grouping of movies that I went and did a disaster flick marathon. So I hit up some classic disaster movies from quite early disaster movies. You know, I went all the way back to Earthquake, which is one of the first ever sort of modern cinema disaster movies set in LA, all the way through to, I think the most recent one I watched was Greenland from about 5-6 years ago, which was, I think, an Amazon Prime movie. And I'll just run through. So Earthquake, fantastically good fun, great cast, like Charlton Heston, classic cast of like 70s actors, and really impressive special effects for a movie of that era, and also like a pretty downbeat ending, like a really downbeat ending that shows you the devastation of LA. And I think I'll avoid spoiling what characters died, because a lot of people probably haven't seen this movie because it's a 70s movie. Check out Earthquake. It's an absolute humdinger of a fun movie. And then I did, what else did I do? I did The Day After Tomorrow, Jake Gyllenhaal, Dennis Quaid, you know, weather messes up the planet. Basically, this was at the time when everybody was coming to terms with the reality of the climate crisis, and you know, this was a very much hot button topic at that moment. And basically, global warming does the opposite, freezes the planet, and everybody there's like a big tsunami that goes through New York, and it's all about saving Jake Gyllenhaal, Dennis Quaid's son, at the end of the third act. And that's an interesting choice in that movie as well, because the actual global impact of this crisis is kind of downplayed in the movie, and it becomes very much a father-son epic in the third act, and about him saving his son, and that's how the director obviously chose to bring that human element to the forefront, and it wasn't just a disaster porn Roland Emmerich style disaster movie. And let's be real, I did some of them too. I did 2012, which is Roland Emmerich, and I will always enjoy a Roland Emmerich movie ever since Independence Day. I think he does spectacle better than anyone. People are really hard on Moonfall, for example, which is another one I've watched relatively recently, and his most recent one. It is proper balls to the wall, over the top, hard sci-fi, the concepts in that movie, and I love the swings he takes. Is it the best one he's done? Not by a long shot. 2012 though, John Cusack in the lead there, is a perfectly good movie. Obviously the emotional core of that is the family unit in the center of that movie, which is what the audience can then latch onto, with all the massive, oh my god, massive over the top disaster elements that come into that movie. And then with the weirdest third act as well, with these ark ships, and it becomes this, you know, Old Testament allegory about, you know, the earth is flooded, and like, you know, the guy's Noah, and the animals are on the ships and they all have to survive. It's like, whoa, okay, swings were made with this as well. Some big concepts at play which you wouldn't necessarily expect. I also watched Volcano, which is Tommy Lee Jones movie, and he's brilliant in it. He's brilliant in everything. But this is about the idea of a volcano erupting in the center of LA. Again, if you've not seen it, this is a 90s one, came out around the same time as Pierce Brosnan's turn as Dante's Peak. I'd say I kind of prefer Dante's Peak. The scale of that's a bit different because it's just this mountain basically in the middle of nowhere with a small town attached to it. But the characters and the performances in that, I think, are a bit better other than the leads. But Tommy Lee Jones does a great job in Volcano. It's a real rip-roaring adventure with some great moments of human sacrifice. If you've not seen it, it's another high recommend for me. Really good fun. And then finally, I think a movie that a lot of people haven't seen and hasn't really got a huge amount of cachet is Greenland. I think this was a Prime Video original or something like that. It came out, I want to say 2017, 2018, something like that. It's Gerard Butler, Marina Baccarin, from now well known from Deadpool movies, playing Ryan Reynolds' love interest in that. But yeah, oh, and also Firefly, of course, back in the day. And they're the family unit. They have a son in this as well. And it's actually just all the concept of this is there is a big comet that's going to hit the Earth. The scientists think at first it's not going to, but because Jerry is a kind of structural engineer, they're going to need him to rebuild the planet after, so he gets the golden ticket to survive in these bunkers in Greenland. Well, lots of things go wrong on the way, and it's just this quest, one man's quest to get his wife and child to safety in Greenland. And it's got some really harrowing moments, it's got some great set pieces, great action, very, very, very good human drama. And I honestly think Gerard Butler gives a fantastic performance in this. It's one of his best. And I think it's quite surprising that this isn't considered a higher kind of more important movie on people's lists. I think it's a great example of the disaster movie genre. And if you've not seen this one, which I think a lot of people haven't, check out Greenland. I think you'll have a really good time. It's a real popcorn munching, roller coaster of an experience with a really strong emotional heart. I think it's one of those things where if I ever did create like a movie YouTube channel, I'd love to dive into how, great examples and then also the missteps of how filmmakers try to give emotional heart to movies which are predominantly spectacle based. So disaster films, because all of these that I've given you examples of have obviously tried to set the drama around a cast of human characters, and better or worse, that sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't. One of the great examples of where it really doesn't work, I think, is the Skyscraper movie, which was Dwayne Johnson doing Die Hard. And I think it is a disaster movie as well, which is also aping movies like The Towering Inferno, which is another great classic disaster movie from the same era as Earthquake. But boy, oh boy, does Towering Inferno do it better. Because the characterization at the core of Skyscraper is just poor. So you don't have that connection. If you don't connect to those characters in these spectacle movies, they just fall flat. They will not just hold up on the quality of their CGI disasters alone, or model work, or any of it. So there's a lot to talk about there, but the ones I've sort of shouted out, I think the best there from that collection I watched is definitely, I'm going to go Greenland. I think Greenland is the best one there. I think the biggest spectacle is definitely 2012. The best character that combines with spectacle, Greenland. And the last movie I want to mention, I only watched this last night, inspired by the very, very sad news of Robert Redford's passing, right? So Robert Redford is an absolute screen legend, an icon of Hollywood, not just brilliant for his acting, but for his activism and for his production work and his just sort of shepherding of the system that has created us so many movies. He's obviously been a creator, a director, a producer, as well as an actor. But I watched The Last Castle because I wanted to show it to my wife last night, which is a great movie where he is a general that has been imprisoned in a military prison for a crime he did commit. This isn't an innocent man. He's done something wrong, and he's in there with a lot of other soldiers that have committed sometimes violent, awful crimes. But it's just this great character piece between him and James Gandolfini, who's also an amazing actor from The Sopranos, most well known there, who has also passed on. And both of them give fantastic career-defining performances. And I think it's one of those movies, again, not a lot of people have seen. And the concept is that basically, Gandolfini's sort of controlling this prison. He's the colonel in charge, of the men there. And he just, he removes all the respect from these soldiers. And any good they did in the military, any of the sacrifice they made is basically in his eyes erased as the warden because they've committed a crime in some form, be it violent or not. And therefore anything they've done before is erased and it doesn't matter. And basically Redford's character wants to bring that self-respect back to them. So they butt heads. And then it has a bit of a third act action culmination, which is a little bit far-fetched, but I think it works just about, kinda, in the prison setting. But the best bits is definitely Redford and Gandolfini acting opposite each other and this kind of battle of wits they have, because they're both military men. So they have this inherent respect of the chain of command. And obviously Redford's character was his 3-star general and Gandolfini's only a colonel. So there's like this element of ego at play, which is wonderfully encapsulated in the performances and the writing. And yeah, it's a great prison movie. It's a great kind of war movie, and it's a great movie to see Robert Redford at his confident acting best. I mean, it's not the most classic Robert Redford movie. It's not Sneakers, it's not The Sting, and it's definitely not All the President's Men, but I've seen those movies many more times, so I was kind of keen to watch The Last Castle. But I am going to watch some more Robert Redford movies because of his passing, and I want to just, remember him for the incredible work he's done. And he will be sadly missed. It's not an untimely passing. He was in his late 80s. I think everybody knew this was going to happen sooner or later. But a true icon that has done so much great stuff for Hollywood that, I think he's going to leave a big gap, right? People are really going to miss him. So that's it for movies. Lots have gone over there in a very short amount of time. And we're going to now hit on to TV, because there's a lot of great stuff going on in TV time as well as a classic rewatch. I'm going to start on the slightly negative one, though, I think. So Star Trek Strange New Worlds just finished its final season. Now, I thought up until season 3, Star Trek Strange New Worlds was, without a doubt, well, actually, the second best Star Trek of the modern kind of collection of film and TV that we've had. So post Abram movies, we've had a few shows. We've had Picard, we've had Strange New Worlds, we've had Discovery, and then we also had what is the best one, which is Star Trek Lower Decks, which is the animated comedy, but also most reverential and incredible love letter to multiple eras of Star Trek. Lower Decks is by far the best, but I understand that to a lot of people, because it's animated and because it's so referential, it's actually quite impenetrable. So if we move that one to one side, Star Trek as live action, Strange New Worlds is the best, right? So it's the Pike era on the Enterprise, so before Kirk becomes the captain, but Spock's there, Uhura's there, Una's there as number one, and this was basically hinted at in the TOS original series, when you first saw Pike in that as like a guy who's wheelchair bound after a horrible accident that happened on a training mission, which is why he was no longer, well, actually it's not why he was no longer the captain of the Enterprise, he'd already moved on at that point, but you got that. And then obviously in season 1, they dealt with that. And then he came to terms with the reality that he would face that future, and then decided to basically seize the day, make the most of his life. And it was incredibly optimistic and wonderful. And Jason, Ensign Mount, I want to say, is the lead in this. He was briefly Black Bolt in the awful Inhumans TV show, but he's fantastic in this. He's fantastic as Pike. And the cast is great. You've got really good characters playing, really iconic characters. You've got really good actors who honestly make you almost forget those incredible original series and movie performances from the likes of Leonard Nimoy and Nichelle Nichols. However, they make them their own, but this season 3 has been a big dip in quality. One of the things that was so great about season 1 and 2 is they basically let the writers go wild with the concepts of the episodes. They had all these kind of contained thematic episodes, which were a bit hokey in their concept, I suppose, but because of the performances and because of the fun, it worked. Now, we had a couple of those types of episodes in season 3, but everything felt just so much more formulaic, safer. It felt like some of the spark had been pulled out of it. Now, the rumors are it's because Alex Kurtzman, the executive producer, who's been the executive producer on a lot of these modern eras of Star Trek stuff, has gotten more involved with this season because of the popularity of the previous 2 seasons. Now, to my mind, this guy is not a good creator. He basically ruined Discovery, though it's interesting because Strange New Worlds span off of Discovery, because that's when the Enterprise first showed up again in this era, was in that show and was some of the best stuff in that show. And then they threw Discovery off into the far, far future, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And thankfully that show's over. He also mishandled Picard, which had some terrible stuff in that first season. I think the second season brought it back a little bit, but I still think it was nostalgia over quality. And now, unfortunately, he seems to be more involved with Strange New Worlds, which has resulted in perhaps the weakest season yet. Now, the creators have come out and said, because there's been 2 seasons already, 2 subsequent seasons have been greenlit, season 4 and 5, they have said that, sorry about season 3, it was a bit shit because of the writer's strike. Sure, okay. I can believe that. I can believe that had an effect. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt, and I hope season 4 brings it back to the quality of season 1 and 2, because that season 2 cliffhanger, which was all around this sort of reimagining of the Gorn alien race as this super threat, and then actually how the culmination of that at the start of season 3 was so strong. And those weren't gimmicky episodes. Those were just quality action, good character, good peril, good threat, what you want from Star Trek. But this season has lost a lot of it. I mean, those first 2 seasons also had that message of optimism, and they did great storytelling with the style of the original series. Sorry, very poor description. In which they use science fiction to hold a mirror up to our reality and our social issues, and then actually really tackle that through science fiction in ways that you wouldn't have been able to do in a conventional TV show or film. And you can get away with a lot because you say it's the future and it's aliens, but they actually dealt with a lot of bigotry elements and things of that nature, which is what the original series did so fantastically, and was what put Star Trek on the map and made it this enduring IP that's lasted for, God, well over 50 years now, 60 years. So they started to get back to that, but season 3, it's kind of lost all of that. And there's one thing I've really disliked, which is they've turned Spock into this sort of like Lothario. He's like shagging his way through the female elements of the Enterprise crew. And that, frankly, it maybe not just the female elements. We'll see what happens. I just think that's a really strange choice, because his dynamic with Nurse Chapel comes from the original series. He always had a bit of a thing with Nurse Chapel. It was more unsaid. It was less overt. They made it more overt in Strange New Worlds. So that's fine. But then he's moved on to other characters, and it's just, it doesn't sit well with me. It's like, why mess with that? Why mess with Spock of all the characters and make him that? I mean, they keep finding ways of bringing Kirk into the show, and the actor playing him is very good. He does a really good Kirk. And the scenes where he's with Spock and Uhura, and then they brought Scotty in this season as well. That was super exciting to see from the nostalgia perspective, but also just that excitement of seeing the beginnings of those relationships. As a Trekkie, I really enjoyed that. But, it feels so shoehorned. It feels so fake, the way in which they find some ways to bring him in. I don't know. It just was not well written, wasn't well conceived. I have hope for season 4, but at this point, season 3 was definitely the lowest point for the show. But fingers crossed. Right, other big sci-fi that's on TV right now. Foundation just had its season finale for its 3rd season. And boy, oh boy, wow, that show takes some swings. I don't want to spoil it too much because I really want people to watch this show. Is it proper hardcore science fiction that can be impenetrable at times? Absolutely. Does it reward you for paying attention and with engaging the characters? It certainly does. You cannot be pissing about on your phone when you're watching Foundation. And if you haven't dove into it, get to season 1, and you'll binge it through 1, 2, 3. You won't be able to stop. And then season 3 ends with some huge shakeups that completely alter the character dynamics, the universe dynamics of that whole show. And partly, I believe this is because the showrunners have decided to move on, because the show is going to undergo a bit of a change into season 4. The budgets are going to be reduced. And that on the outside sounds scary for a fan of the show like me. But actually, I think what they've done at the end of that season is, I think they're setting up for less dramatic time jumps, which at this point have been basically 100 or so years between each season, so that in the next season is going to be much more a direct continuation. And I think with a smaller budget, and I think what we saw at the end of season 4 definitely indicates to me that, they're going to get rid of some of the existing actors and cast who may be quite expensive in these particular individuals, and they can then bring that cast tighten. They can kind of focus the show more specifically. And I'm quite excited about that, because that will make it more of an approachable product. I think that could get more people. And I could see season 4 being a bit of a soft reboot to actually get out to a wider audience, because what they've done, I'm being very careful here without spoilers, is connect the concepts of Foundation to other concepts within the Asimov wider universe in ways that the books certainly don't do. This has now departed so wildly from the source material that you could be mad about it, but I'm not, because I love that. If I want to read those books, I can read those books again, and I've read them many times before. I think they're absolute classic pieces of concept-driven hard science fiction. This show, with its focus on characters, is from the very beginning was always super different to those books. And that's not a problem for me. And I've embraced that. And I'm excited to see what comes next with the characters and the cast that do make it into season 4. And I can't wait to see how this is going to connect to the wider Asimov universe. I think we're going to get a very, very different show. Like, this will be like part 2 of the Foundation TV show in season 4. And I'm filled with excitement about that. That was a mind-blowing finale. The whole season has been OTT with huge moments, with great character moments, and I love the ambition I love the ambition of what they did in those final 2 episodes. I think it's just the best. It's maybe the best sci-fi on. For All Mankind is really, really good as well. But it's just so damn good. And the money on the screen, and I can understand why Apple probably wants to spend less, because it doesn't get the biggest numbers. They are clearly committed to it, and they don't want to end it without the proper conclusion. And I respect that a lot, and I really appreciate that. Boy, oh boy. So Apple TV Plus, my word. Just banger after banger after banger. But we will give some props now to, well, I say we'll give some props. So let's talk about Noah Hawley and Alien Earth. I'm up to date on that. The penultimate episode, the final episode is this week for season 1. Can't mention this enough though. This is on Disney Plus, and I've now cancelled my Disney Plus subscription after what happened this week and Jimmy Kimmel being pulled from television due to his comments about Charlie Kirk, which weren't even that bad. Honest to God, guys, do not support Disney. They're obviously, that's the same company as ABC, and that's the company that's done what it's done to Jimmy Kimmel. They do not believe in freedom of the press. They do not believe in free speech. It's frankly disgusting that they're all, just bending over and taking it from the Trump administration. I know I'm in the UK, thank God, and we've got our own problems, but man, oh man, that place, that United States, place I used to love going to, love the culture. I've talked about games and movies and TV from the US for 20 years, basically. I've been doing this, and I'll always love it, but from afar. Like right now, I wouldn't want to go anywhere near setting foot in the United States. It's terrifying over there right now, and it must be so much worse for the individuals over there. And just don't support these companies that are just giving in. I think they're going to try and U-turn what they've done because of the backlash personally, but I don't know how, because the big companies involved, it's all money driven. It's all about, we've got a big merger happening, or we want to be sold to X or Y. So, to get it past approval, get it past the FCC, which is controlled by Trump, we need to give Trump what he wants. Well, they keep giving Trump what he wants. He's going to take more and more and more. But look, it's great. And that's the problem with this. Alien Earth is awesome, right? It's so cool. It's a take on the alien universe that is just so strange and weird. And it's like, do I love it for in the same way I love Aliens, the movie? No. Because it's not that. It isn't an action romp. Do I love it in the same way I like the original Alien movie by Ridley Scott? No, because it's not a haunted house ride with basically a slasher villain in it. It's doing these big things around the concepts of what it is to be human, what it is to be real. The idea that xenomorphs and aliens, they're just animals with instincts, right? And we shouldn't think of them as villains. They're just doing what they do. And then there's the idea that there's other concepts in here about language and communication and family and what it is to be a family and what kind of families you can have. It doesn't have to just be connected through genetics. There's so many big concepts here. Child labor, the idea of experimentation, human rights, synthetic rights, in a world in which now we live, in which transhumanism, the idea of going beyond our physical containers into maybe living in cyberspace, if you like to use the old language. Are we that far away from that? I don't think so. I think I'll probably see it in my lifetime. At least some of the early first steps into that universe, I think we'll see that. So this is dealing with all of this stuff, the fear around AI and these big ideas. And then we have the wrapper of this sort of dystopic, corporate driven Earth controlled by these giant corporations. And then the other parts of it where it's like scientific experimentation done without oversight and what that would mean. And then we've obviously got the action, we've got the aliens, we've got the synthetics in there as well, which are also children. It's just nuts and it's crazy. And I have no idea what we're going to see in the final episode of this season. It's clear that, he's been told there'll be more because there's only 8 episodes. And I feel like there's just still so much to go over in this season. I think it's almost certainly going to end on a huge cliffhanger of some kind, or at least with multiple threads still just left dangling. But I also think he'll take some mad swings and it will go into some crazy places. And I'm pumped to see what happens. If you're not watching Alien Earth, if you've got even the slightest interest in the Alien franchise, you've got to check this out, or at least wait for it to finish and then watch the whole thing, because it does feel like one of those shows that would have been even better to binge. Like, I do like it is done well, episodic, because he often ends episodes on these crazy good needle drops, which are kind of incongruous but at the same time perfect, and it leaves you going, oh my god, give me the next episode. And so it does work to give you those moments. But yeah, I think if you were able to binge this, it would be even brilliant, even more brilliant. Oh my god, Alien Earth is so damn good. Final TV show. It's back to the 70s we go. And the 80s and that era of sci-fi, which is kind of my favorite era, I think. I love all that stuff. And I decided, I don't know why I decided to do this, but I decided to rewatch the original V TV show. So V, for visitors, was an alien invasion show from the 70s. It was originally a mini series of feature-length episodes, and then there was another mini series of feature-length episodes called The Final Battle. And I've watched the original series and The Final Battle, but then there is also a TV show that comes after that, which had 2 seasons and I think ends on a cliffhanger. But I haven't got through the TV series yet. I've done the 2 original miniseries, and this is just the most of its time awesomeness you could imagine, right? So the aliens show up, they pretend to be friendly, they pretend to have humanity's interest at heart, but really they're basically fascists. They're looking to control things. Yeah, let's be real, the Nazi iconography is not subtle in this show, and to be honest, in the era it was made, it was, very much within the lifetime of Holocaust survivors, which there are characters of in the show, that are trying to tell people, this is what they did over there. Can you not realize that this is what they're doing here? And I think it's worth watching right now in a way, because fascism is on the rise seemingly in the United States, which is just, or let's at least call it authoritarianism, right? Which is definitely what we're seeing there. Are we quite into fascism yet? Maybe not, but it's bits and pieces of it, and maybe we're not far off of it. So it's quite telling. This is the thing. We forget history. It doesn't take long for people to forget what's happened before. And I think, as again, like I mentioned, the brilliance of the original series of Star Trek and how it was able to tell these very real sociological stories about, the inequalities of what was happening at that time in the 60s. V does that with this as well. You're able to put those concepts of fascism in science fiction. It becomes more palatable, more digestible by the masses, and therefore you still get the people thinking about these things, right? Which is so important, such an important part of science fiction, of speculative fiction. And I think it's gone a bit to the wayside. You don't see it as much in the books and the comics or any of it now, or the TV shows. And I think we need to get back to that, because when you're facing such authoritarianism in reality, that's when you have to find a way for it to be reflected in media so that the populace can wake up to the negative sides of this, to the consequences of allowing this type of government and this type of society. We have to be able to resist that. And if science fiction can help us recognize that, all the better for it. And V is a fantastically good show. Yeah, look, let's be real. The special effects certainly show their age, especially on a TV budget. Performances are very much of that decade, TV actors. So in The Final Battle, we do get a huge part in this by Michael Ironside, one of my favorite character actors of all time. That guy does kind of like untrustworthy, slightly unhinged villain better than anyone else on the planet, but often not villain, more like anti-hero. So he's often the guy he knows what's got to be done, and it's not always a nice thing, but by God, he's going to get it done. And I love Michael Ironside with a passion. If there's one of the few actors, I'm not the starstruck kind of person, not the kind of person that wants to sit down and have a beer with an actor or talk to many of them, but Michael Ironside, yeah, I think he'd have great stories. Something about him is just charisma and his presence on screen. And I absolutely adore his performance in V, The Final Battle, where he's in the second 2 episodes of the 3 for that. And he's in it loads. So if you like me, you love a bit of Michael Ironside, check it out just for that. He's just fabulous. But yeah, there's some fun creature elements. There's some really good action in its limited kind of capacity. And at the end of the day, good triumphs over evil. And that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? Wow, we've covered a lot, guys. Borderlands 4, Heading Out, The Last Castle, Naked Gun, Greenland, Volcano, 2012, Earthquake, The Day After Tomorrow, Big, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Foundation, Alien Earth, Star Trek, Changing Worlds, and V. What a bumper episode you guys have had from me all by myself. And all of that in under an hour. I feel like I've just speed run a podcast for you. I hope you enjoyed it though. It's been great talking to you all again. I'm sorry it's been 2 weeks, and I'm sorry it's going to be another 2 weeks before I'm back. And I really hope to get a giant. There's no denying it. When we do one of these with a giant, it's better than me doing it by myself. But I do enjoy chatting with you, uncut, unedited hour of me speaking to you. Sorry about that. I do apologize. But yeah, it's been really good. And you can check us out, 8deadgiants.com, for all of our links, and anywhere we can be found on the internet. Once again, I plead with you to please leave us a 5-star review on an Apple or Spotify or anything of that nature, or an Audible, because that will help get our eyes on this podcast, a little podcast that could. And, you know, I look forward to being back talking about games, movies, TV, and all the other giants in a couple of weeks with you. So thank you very much for listening. Have a good one. Bye-bye.